So I'm going to talk for about 30 to 40 minutes and hopefully allow a bit of space at the end to ask some questions. And I really look forward to uncovering and unpacking my experience with small compact housing. And I'm going to look at a range of types, pre-built tiny homes that are craned into location, a more flat pack assemble type of home. I've got a couple of examples of those that are delivered on trucks and then built. Relocatable off-grid tiny homes, which can be totally independent, that is not connected to any services or alternatively plugged in. And more permanent small homes that have an interesting construction type. And then finally, a speculative tiny home that we've been looking at here in the office. So there's half a dozen projects I'll go through, and all various sizes. And it comes down to size, doesn't it? And that's kind of what this is about. What is a tiny home? How big is it? And does it work? And is it good value for money? So there's some of the questions I hope that we'll scratch the surface of. The image that I've started off with is a natural image, and I think we all relate to that because it's nature is where kind of small homes have come from, and they're legible. They're from materials that possibly are more humble and gathered together, and I think that's kind of, we have a natural affinity with the natural world, and so I think that's one of the reasons why there's a lot of interest and appeal around small living. And it's not a recent an event that's garnered interest in small living. If we look back in history and various climates, you can see that we have a kind of a natural affinity with this type of tiny home, which is an extreme climate. But there's something that touches our soul, I think, in terms of taking control of the environment we're in. And so you can see this Eskimo building his own home, which might be for a week or one night, but able to take control of the environment you're in by building small and not reliant on a whole lot of tradies coming and going and a huge expense. So there's this sense of taking control of how we conduct our lives, about how much money we spend, and creating something that's legible and small and has a kind of exciting exciting sort of legibility around size. So it doesn't necessarily have to be this sort of climate, of course, but there's an affinity we have, I think, and I have, with seeing images like this, thinking that it's possible to live with humble materials and what's available. And of course, this image is, of course, very sustainable. And that's the other thing about tiny homes is because of the size itself, there's got to be an inbuilt sustainability edge to what we do. So in this area, and from whether it be extremely cold environment or an exposed hill top. This is a Fred Flintstone inspired house, but tiny, in Portugal, and it's again the extreme environment to build in. But there's a sort of wonderful idea where you can use nature to create small habitation, and this house is peculiar, but again, I find it there's no kind of building architecture in this type of building, but there's a wonderful attraction I have to something where you use what materials are available and create something that's building in the round. And small houses are buildings in the round. They're generally not built cheek to jowl as we find in the suburbs. So again, there's a natural affinity we have with buildings you can walk right around. And are not meandering, but are quite compact. And again, it's a sense of a cubby house or an escape. And there's a sense of escapism around tiny homes too, which I think adds to its mystery, and adds to the sort of charm of what a small house looks like and can be. And of course, here in Australia, the masters of small living are in fact Indigenous Australians that built incredibly sustainable houses for tens of thousands of years. left no footprint behind, and made out of materials which are totally renewable and sustainable, and lived very happy lives. Again, no architecture involved, you know, I think that this is a natural attraction for us to perhaps return to this simplicity of living, and which again small housing offers, as opposed to the complexity of mowing lawns and repairing gutters, which a lot of us do on weekends to maintain large houses. So there's a wonderful liberation also, I think, in the attraction of small living. So let's look at some of the examples that I've garnered together around what housing that I've seen and we've done here at Maddison Architects. So the first one I'd like to show you is a pre-built craned-in small home, and it's there we go. Technology. So this house is we followed on Grand Designs Australia, and it's a pre-built craned-in tiny home. It's in Lewisham, which is just outside Hobart, and this was Grand Designs Series 8, Episode 5. And I'll just look at the size, 45 square metres. I think that just sneaks in under what is known as what is acceptable in current thinking around what is tiny. I think tiny goes from about 10 square metres up to about this size, 45, 50 square metres. The next category is small housing, which is about 50 to 90 to 100 square metres. And then in my own categorisation, compact homes are 100 to 200 square metres. And of course, the average Australian home currently is around 260 square metres. So there's these loose boundaries about using the words tiny, small, compact, and average, but I think this house here falls in that tiny category of footprint. So this wonderful little house perched up in Lewisham, overlooking the water, is a wonderful little example of how a building can be created out of two pods that were built in a factory. And sorry, there's us down at Lake Pyman. So the owner's the second woman on the right, it's Alice, and her father and my executive producer, Brooke Bayvell, and myself on a barge at Lake Pyman, getting the timber out of Lake Pyman to build this house at Lewisham. And there's where the timber came from. So there's a wonderful sustainable story around this particular house, which I think goes back to the notion of the early images I showed you of the sustainability and how that can be engaged with simply with small housing. So all the timber out for this little pod here is all from Lake Pyman. It's all hydrowood. So Alice decided to make her house all out of timber and craftsmen from Tasmania, and so this reclaimed timber from Lake Pyman was part of this story. And here is the harvesting of the timber from a barge on the far west coast of Tasmania at Lake Pyman, where the timber's taken out and reclaimed and then milled down. So that this is a part of this particular story, and importantly, the idea of this house was it was made in a factory, and this is Pod Matrix builders just out of Hobart in their factory. And to the top of the screen, you can see the house that we're looking at sitting on a frame. So this particular tiny home is one around being prefabricated. This one's in two parts. They're about each part is about able to fit a truck about 2.8 metres by 6 metres or so. And so the idea is that it's totally constructed in a factory, all weather, and fitted out pretty well totally in this factory. And then the benefit is that there's relative speed in being able to construct this type of building, and you can have quality control inside a factory. And so that helps keep cost to a minimum. And the issue with this type of craned-in building is that you have to have a site where a big truck can get to and can be dropped off. And this was fairly steep, this site, so it did take a big crane to drop it in position. But we have a fairly finely designed house by local Tasmanian architects that have been able to contribute to this particular design. And so here it is being taken from Hobart to Lewisham on the back of the low bed truck and craned into position onto a fairly rudimentary steel frame. But the quality of this house is beautiful because the client decided to really invest in local trade and local craft and gathered, and it's kind of a lovely kind of notion of gathering together local people, engaging local materials and craft to create a really finely honed pod of a building that can talk to its landscape. So this building nestled down onto that steel frame and then finally went into position. So there is quite a lot of design in this building. As simple as it is, in terms of the format, there's a lot of fine tuning of detailing. And the big sheet glass window that looks out across the water is not your standard form of construction. So it did take quite a lot of architectural and engineering nous to develop something, not the sort of thing you do yourself. And there's another beautiful shot of the house resting around the one tree that was left on the site. Interestingly, it is in more of a suburban setting with houses either side. So, but because it's small, it's off the boundaries and you can read the building in totality in the round. The building works such that it opens completely through the centre, standing on the back edge of the site looking out. And everything in this house was made by local trades and local crafts. As I mentioned, even the bath, which is made out of hewn pine, beautiful rare timber, sitting on this outside deck. And then as we go inside, we can see the legibility of this house. Highly efficient in that it's all double glazed, fully insulated, and the other thing about small housing is that the cost of heating is minimal. Because the volume is so small, of course. Working way through now, this building was joined together with quite a visible joint line, which was expressed by thin slits of glass. So running right down the centre of this building, you can see a skylight and a vertical strip of glasses where the two buildings met, which aid the construction method. So there's some grace around the way the buildings went together. So there was almost a slip joint, if you like. But it came fully equipped with the kitchen intact, the little bedroom nook built with storage underneath the double bed, fully lined. So a very affordable way to do it, where we don't need to get trades to a remote location to be able to put it together. Wonderful warm interior. Everything was crafted, including the lounge, as you see in the foreground, by local tradesmen. It was moved through. The fireplace was built by a local blacksmith, and looking back the other way. So quite a interesting sort of assembly type for a small house. Every storage is key, so built-in seats become storage. The next one I want to talk about is a next type of small home, and this is a very small home, and I call this small home because it's more than 50 square metres. This is a flat pack style assembly house by Dominic and Sue Alvaro. This was on Grand Designs Australia Season 1. 65 square metre site, wonderful way we can utilise lost bits of land in the suburbs. Well, not suburbs, this is inner suburbs, really. This is Surrey Hills, Sydney. But this one's been put together with precast concrete dropped into location. So flat pack in the sense that all concrete was made by Hanson, which is a concrete company, and it was all craned in. And a very sensible way to build a very small house in a compact location, because there's nowhere to for the builder to organise himself. So there was no spare land for site sheds and so forth, or storing materials. So the house was all pre-made, dropped in a number of weeks. There was street closures, but this type of house is fairly fairly formidable in terms of the structure, very strong, durable. It is like a fortress, but it did give great affordability to and this house is about, I think it was about $650,000, which is a lot compared to tiny housing, but for a house in a city, that's pretty good value. Now, it's on a land of about 65 square metres, but this is this when it's multiplied up over its 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 levels, really delivers a house around most suburban houses. So we're looking at about what's that, 300 square metres if you include the roof. So it actually multiplies up to a rather large home off a tiny footprint piece of land. And it is like a suburban home stacked vertically. So we have the garden is actually on the roof rather than in the backyard. And this is a very dense part of Sydney. So it's in terms of, it's a back lane. So there's security issues and being able to go vertical in the city was a great solution to give them amenity. And on each level, there's a different room. So there's a little model of the Dominic Alvaro, who was the designer for this, came up with, and the section through the building: garage, bedroom, living, dining, and roof terrace. And once you get up the top, there's an incredible outlook over in a suburban Surrey Hills setting. So here's the house being assembled, dropped in one panel at a time. It's getting up to the living room level, up above the local surroundings. There's a historic area looking back towards the city of Sydney. So a wonderful solution, a flat pack solution to deliver a great amenity. There's an interior shot on the left, and then to the right, a shot the way it fits into the local texture, the grain of Surrey Hills. Open plan, and this is a good example of how an architect can squeeze more value out of design, because the whole building is about creating the maximum volume, and storage is maximised by my phone going off. Yes, so this house is really highly articulated by an architect who lives in the house, but an interesting solution given that the constraints of inner city. How are we going for time, Holly? I've got to give it a shake on. So the other one I'd like to talk about is a timber frame flat pack house, which is in East Melbourne, and this is a much lighter touch, a lighter solution. There's not the security issues, and there's a different setting. It's in the backyards of East Melbourne, but it's a mini skyscraper, really. This is Grand Design Season 6.5. If you wanted to look at that later, but the house is on 20 square metres land, which easily qualifies as a tiny home. But Ralph Alfonso, who's the owner of this building, got a permit to go 4 levels to a rooftop that overlooks East Melbourne, in a fantastic solution on what was a 1.5 car space, a little bit of leftover land in East Melbourne. So 20 square metres per level. Each level is a different function. So ground level is big enough for a motorbike or a mini car. Then living, bedroom, and roof deck. But what's interesting about this is it was all made flat pack in the factory. There's Ralph on the right putting the building together. And so it's assembled in pieces and to suit a truck. And then that's the roof deck actually being assembled with its insulation and so forth. And delivery is on a low tray truck. Craning was an issue in terms of getting access for that, but very quick assembly. And once they got the first level on, went together really easily. Super insulated. This is a almost passive house standard. This building's been monitored by Melbourne University. You could go on the Melbourne University website and check it out, because they're actually day-to-day monitoring how efficient this house is. Got geothermal, which is in the ground heating. It's super insulated, and it's got it's off-grid capability, although it's not off-grid. There's living room. So the whole notion of this was that he built a highly sustainable house on his 5 metre by 4 metre piece of land, and this building is fully above the slab, fully timber framed and timber lined, including the furniture. And his couch turns out to be you flip it over and it becomes a dining table. So pop-out TV pops out of the unit behind Ralph, and it's a very interesting way to think about the way you could do a house in a dense, suburban setting. There it is from the roof. So it's got solar panels on the vertical and on the horizontal roof plane, and that's all stored. It's taken down to battery power at the battery storage in the basement. Now, why isn't there more of these? Well, there's not many pieces of land this small in Melbourne or in any city that you can get your hands on. But it's a great example of, he actually owned the buildings on the left, which he sold and kept the car space, and was able to get a permit to put on 1.5 car spaces this really tight building, and able to get up because he had no confrontation or friction with overshadowing on neighbours. So a fortunate piece of land to be able to do this on. I think it's a delightful house and a fantastic way to think about tiny housing, that it can be in a suburban. It doesn't have to be on the back of a trailer carted around. And I guess that's the next one I want to look at is that style of house. Oh, here we go. So the next type I wanted to look at was a relocatable tiny home, which is, I guess, most people's conception of what tiny housing is. It's not small, it's not compact, it is tiny. So this little building Maddison Architects did, commissioned by the RACV, and it's really an exhibition piece, a one-off exhibition piece to be taken around Victoria, showcasing what you can do with small living. It's not designed to be manufactured en masse. So the budget doesn't kind of make sense. Tiny housing, this sort of thing would be really affordable if it was en masse, but as a one-off exhibition piece, it's not. So this was highly articulated with a lot of features in it, a lot of high-tech features, which you don't have to do. So it has voice-activated system, it has home security, it has black water, grey water, fresh water storage, power collection, can be plugged in or totally independent. Black water can't be treated, but can be collected, a bit like a mobile home, I guess. This is built to go. The outside cladding is all charred timber, no maintenance, gutters are all hidden, the inside's all lined in timber. So steel frame base, I'll go through that. There it is. We actually didn't do it on wheels. We did it on a skid base, so you could drop it off the back of a truck. There's the plan. So the idea is a bedroom on a raised podium with water storage underneath. There's a little lounge seat next to that. It's a tiny little kitchen with caravan appliances. Heating is a little compact stove. Bathroom down the other end, which is just a basic shower, WC and basin, and then planting both ends with a fold-out deck, so the whole thing can be wrapped up like a parcel. The doors and the deck can be wrapped up and be like a Christmas present and be trucked around. So yeah, under construction. So this has got very heavy, 9 tons of steel, because it had to be traipsed around Victoria and dropped off as a showpiece. So if you were to do a one-off, you probably wouldn't do it all out of steel. But interestingly lined, lots of initiatives in this were investigated, the construction type and insulation. Now, so insulation, big deal. We think of insulation as about increasing the thermal resistance of temperature going between to inside and outside. In this, we looked at that, and also thermal mass, how to get thermal mass into a tiny home. So what we did is behind where I'm standing there's a wall with some white stuff on it. That's phase change. You can see it there in that image. And that's this stuff, if you can see me. There's little satchels of soy and coconut and palm oil. And those little satchels provide 60% more efficiency than insulation. This house is 60% more efficient than a normal residential house. So this phase change, or PCM's phase change material as it's known, is lightweight and it doesn't change temperature easily. Insulation, and I'm focusing on this because tiny homes are about sustainability, and I think that's what we have in our minds when we think about tiny homes. It's a small footprint, sustainable to the environment, and also making them really efficient. So this was a great windfall for us finding this PCM phase change material, and it comes in larger sheets, if you can see them here. And you just wrap your house like a doona, And what it does, it provides thermal mass. So insulation, if it works well, would stop about. If you'd be happy if it stopped 13 degrees changing between inside and outside. Whereas this stuff here, once it won't change its state easily, so it'll only change 3 degrees. So it's like having a concrete slab wrapped around a building. So it was good for us to find that material for this little project. Another shot of this little house. The sunshade and doors all fold open. It's an off-the-shelf industrial gridded material, and that all folds up flush with the building. No gutters. We inset the solar panels flush with the building, so it's streamlined. No maintenance on this little building. You can get a shot of the joinery all made out of form ply, which is really affordable. There's no paint in this building. All just left natural cork floor. Doors we invested in heavily. They're a double glazed timber framed unit with steel in them, so that they'll never warp or move. It's a power hammer product, and there's a shot of the interior with the form ply. Form ply is just an off-the-shelf product that you use to pour concrete on. So it comes, there's no finishing, it just comes that way, and there's very low maintenance, just ply with this durable finish on it. Bathroom down the end with a sliding door. We've put a playful thing over the bed for the kids to climb, for children to climb up on. This has built-in seating for you can see to the right at the end for their little kitchenette and little lounge area. Oh yes, and the other thing is we thought about the amenity in these little tiny homes. So view lines were really important to us. So we have as a sense of well-being and not being cooped up in these little houses. So and there's just a shot at the end. So this is an example of this kind of off-grid relocatable tiny home, which is another type, I guess. And it's probably the type that people think of mostly when they think of tiny homes, rather than just something that's fixed. But this one, there's no permits that are easily obtainable currently in Victoria, more so in New South Wales. We're not set up for a government allowing us to put these in our backyards, and it's a real shame, I think. I think there's a great opportunity to use the quarter-acre block by putting this type of building in the front yard, the backyard, and get that idea of communal family living back, where grandma, the kids, young adults can all live together. So I think there's a great opportunity. And I was excited, Maddison Architects were excited about doing this, to lift the lid on showing how these little buildings could be gathered or placed in leftover land. But currently the regulations don't really allow it easily to happen. So there's a way for us to go on this, isn't there? But I think that even to do this, we still need to get a building permit for these. And each one of these tiny homes has different constraints around which council is and where you are, because we have bushfire attack levels, we have soil, foundation conditions to look at, and we have neighbour amenity to look at. So there's still amenity and permits required to be able to do this. So we currently, it's possible, but we need to go through council, unless it's totally mobile. And if it's totally mobile, it's a different thing. But as soon as we put it down on the ground and we connect it to services, it becomes a different beast. So that's the, I could talk for a whole 40 minutes just on that little thing here. A couple of others examples I'd like to talk about is this is a more permanent tiny home. It's actually small, isn't it? It's small. It's over 50 square metres, so it's probably gone to that small category. But we at Maddison Architects did this one recently, and it's more of a cabin. And a client came to us with a piece of land, beautiful land at Blairgowrie, and we designed the house to be separated from an existing structure, which is an old log cabin adjacent next to it. And rather than add on to that log cabin, we put a tiny home connected by an umbilical cord, if you like, a little glazed link. But the building itself's all made from CNC routed timber. Go back, sorry, there's the old log cabin. We built the building in the driveway to this log cabin, and you can see it in the plan here. There's the new section we built to the bottom right of the screen, which is it's like a caboose coming up and kissing the old structure, and it grows out of the landscape, this building. It folds up out of the driveway in a kind of a diagonal form, but it starts at a gradient and grows up. So you can see it here growing up out of the landscape, kissing the old building. I guess the construction type is what we're interested in, and how you build a small building in a kind of a transportable way. So in this one we used CNC routed timber. I just happen to have a sample here. So here it is. It's a fully CNC routed LVL beam, and that's the end of a beam that connects into the larger section, which is this here. This piece. It's like a ghetto blaster, isn't it? So that's it there. You can see the complexity of this. And there's a flitch plate goes into the centre, so you've got concealed fixing. You see down the centre there. And so all the beams connect together. So that little sample shows how accurate CNC routing can be, and sort of what that system delivered was a factory-made object that goes together like a Meccano set. And so here it is going together, and all the beams, it's a total timber upper structure with there's only a couple of bits of steel in it, I think. And so there's the building growing out of the landscape in the driveway. We only took out 2 Muna trees to do this, which was a great bonus. The whole building responds to the environment, the prevailing wind and the gradient. So it's trying to respect that and the old log cabin. There's the interior as it's delivered. Very compact bedroom upstairs, stair up, and the lounge room down. So the whole podium is on concrete, lots of thermal mass from the north sun, and all assembled on site in pieces. So not flat pack in the sense of pre-made wall panels, but all the timbers were CNC routed. Full shop drawings were required to be done, so not just architectural drawings. We had to do shop drawings, which is another step you'd have to go through for this type of home, where they need dead accurate millimetre drawings that have to be done we did them here, but it takes quite a lot of effort to get those drawings dead accurate, because there's nowhere to go when all these pieces arrive if there's a joint that's even out at just a few millimetres. But the technology is available to do this sort of place, and I think it's a great tectonic, a great, I guess, appreciation of the structure when you're doing this. There's a legibility again around this little building. Just a shot of the interiors, and all lightweight. And there's a shot of the outside. All the north glazing, and we've got operable screens on the upper portion. Oh, here we are. Last, and I'm running out of time. I've only got a few minutes actually. So we've actually, here at the office, Maddison Architects developed some other speculative work around what these tiny houses can be. And this is an idea around a fully transportable house that's lightweight, not heavy steel structure. There's 2 parts to this building that are delivered and joined together, which sit on the ground on stumps. There's a connection where they come together, and we've got clarity around where that connection is. So in this particular idea, there's a bedroom component and a living component that are quite separate, and all the action, or the architectural action, if you like, is on the right-hand side of that image. So from our point of view, we think architecture and design has a big part to play, because we do see a lot of tiny homes which are pretty cloying. They're very retrospective. They're trying to represent some sort of old Victorian home, or some notion of bad suburbia, if you like, cobbled together ideas around, well, it's very difficult to say, isn't it? But what we're trying to say here in this proposal is that thoughtful design adds a lot of value to the idea of what a tiny home is, because the structure that you're putting in place can be part of the expression. The plan for this one is bedroom wing and a living room wing. And so the bedroom, this house provides, in fact, did I say the size in that one? Let me just go back. 42 square metres. So each component is about 20 square metres. So bedroom, bathroom, you can see on the left there, so quality living really. And I think the flexibility of buildings being able to join together is a great future for us to think about, rather than just being a single object, where tiny homes can be added on to over time. They can grow as family changes demand it. So I think if you're planning a tiny home, having something that can multiply and expand as your needs do is a worthwhile idea. And so there's just another final shot of this speculative idea. This was developed, this home was developed in collaboration with Kids Undercover, one of the charities that we support, as a way of I guess, showing how there are a whole lot of tiny homes available. Sorry, there are studio apartments available through Kids Undercover for families in need. They're not as elaborate as this. They're tin sheds, basically. But we can drop those. The government allows those small studio apartments to be dropped into backyards for families who are in crisis and don't have ability to house their children. And currently, Victoria has about 650 of those homes travelling around, but they're all not permanent. They're only they're only there for a short time while those needs exist. But this is a more permanent solution around what tiny home could be. And I think that there's great cachet in this kind of idea, and we're very keen on testing these here at Maddison Architects. So just I wanted to share that one with you. And I think that might be my last slide. Oh, this might be the last one. Just the quality of what small living can be. And I guess it's all about cost, and size, where you're tending to build these and put these houses, and what the right format is. And I think there's not one solution. I think there's, as I've tried to explain today, there's a variety of different construction types and solutions out there. And I get all the people that I've worked for or followed on grand designs have a different idea of what tiny or compact living should be. And some of these examples, I hope, really lift the lid on thinking about what the possibilities are for this style of building. So thank you very much for listening, and I think we're getting close to the end. There we are, back to the bird in the nest.
Thank you so much, Peter. Some of those projects are absolutely beautiful. Just to remind everyone, you can just leave your questions in the Q&A bar, and you've also got the ability to upvote some of the questions that you like. So, Peter, have you got the question bar open on your screen? Has Holly been?
Sure. So Lisa has asked, it seems like all tiny, small, compact living is non-accessible, lots of stairs, small space. Do you have any examples of affordable and accessible small living? Lisa, yes. So the house that I showed, the RACV tiny home, we put a ramp in. Now, that was non-compliant, but we were concerned about accessibility. Now, tiny homes generally sit above the ground. And so that tiny home, the RACV one, can I go back to that? That tiny home had a ramp. But the thing about accessibility is that there's a lot of issues around the gradient. If you get a permit, a council permit, they will have to be building BCA, building, construction code of Australia will have to be achieved. So there'll be width, markers, gradients, barriers. So it does become another layer of complexity to make it happen. But a simple ramp, if I'm just going back to that now towards the end, I'll hopefully show you the ramp that we designed. It's a fold down ramp, which makes it easy. There we are. Keep going, please. Keep going. There's the ramp. Keep going. There we go. So that image there shows an accessible ramp that was a gesture, but it's non-compliant. There's no barrier, curbs for the chair to go up and down if it was to be a wheelchair access. But there's a notion of accessibility. So it can be, but it is off the ground. The tiny homes are either on a trailer on wheels or they're sitting on a skid base. They're generally not a slab on ground. So that's an example of how you could get around that, I think. So I just read another question, should I?
Yeah, they've got the most upvoted question here we got is from Stephen Petit, and he asks, you did touch on a little bit about NCC, but he asked, in your experience, what are the main roadblocks with the NCC when building tiny homes?
So National Construction Code has every area of Victoria certainly has a different set of constraints over it. So as I mentioned earlier, there's a geotechnical issue about what's the house going to sit on and will it be stable. There'll be services, and there'll be if it's going to go on another piece of land, you've got councils don't approve that currently in Victoria. And in remote locations, you've got bushfire attack level. So there are hurdles you have to go through with the local municipality to get approval. And even on your own, if it was a remote piece of land, it's probably simpler. But a suburban piece of land, there's issues of subdivision. And basically, I think the councils want to get their rates. They want to get, there's two houses, two kitchens, which define a kitchen and laundry defines a separate house. You've got issues about council wanting their rates to service that. And then, of course, suburban settings, you've got neighbour issues also. So planning permit would be required. So there's roadblocks in time and cost. And it's not made easy in Victoria. So that's my understanding of how it's more difficult to do. Mobile, a lot easier. If you've got somewhere to park it and stay on the run away from authorities, so you can just go around the block and come back and park it again, a lot easier. So should I read another question, Adam?
Yeah, go for it.
So we have one from Rosie Hewitt. Peter, what is your opinion on the durability of tiny homes? Should they be treated like traditional house, or rather like a product that has planned obsolescence and can be recycled easily to keep up with emerging technology trends and or change in lifestyle trends? Look, Rosie, I think tiny homes can be made really durable like any other home. In fact, because they're small, you can invest in more bulletproof materials. So I have no problem in assuming they can be around for 100 years. The one that I left on the screen there has spotted gum exterior. It's all charred timber. It's pretty bulletproof skin, so that's a rain screen. Underneath that is corrugated iron, which is colour-bond treated. There's 7 layers of insulation in it, so it's highly efficient. So the whole thing's a very, very robust little building. But what I think more important is will a tiny home suit your requirements in 20 years' time when you have different needs around a growing family or changing locations or changing lifestyle? And that's the thing about tiny homes, is you have to be very happy with a very small footprint. So there's nowhere for the, for instance, if you wanted to have a 10 people dinner party, it's not going to happen in the tiny home. Or you'll have to go outside. There's nowhere to store 3 or 4 surfboards. It's got limitations on lifestyle. So you have to pare back. That's the biggest foible, I think. You have to pare back your expectations of what a tiny home can deliver.
There was a lot of questions, Peter, on especially in chat, a lot of lively discussion, especially around the costs. So are they all high costs, or can you go down the other route?
Yeah, cost. Thank you, Adam. So the costs, the one on your screen is a one-off and not to be really looked at as a viable option, because I think that was around 200 grand to make that thing, about 100 grand in materials, and probably the same again in labour. But it's highly charged. It's got all these systems that you wouldn't put in as a one-off. It's really structural. Look, my understanding of the palatability of cost is around 100 grand. That's kind of the tipping point. I think if you can build it, and that's tough to make a tiny home with kind of all the features we expect today is not easy. So expectations around quality of finish has to be managed. I think that if you can get one built for 100 in the low hundreds, 120 figure, Beyond that, you're kind of well on the way to putting something more on the ground, aren't you? You sort of, you know, but the good thing about if you can get something up for around that, see, all the houses I showed you then would vary between the smallest ones, probably 260,000, up to about the more permanent CNC routed one, about 350,000. But I suppose you could say, well, 350 grand, that's still pretty good compared to buying a flat in the CBD. You know, they're going to start at what, 600, 500, 400,000. So, and you got a lot more individuality, your own living cell. You're not sandwiched in cheek to jowl. So, but my understanding is most people looking in the around the 100 grand is kind of 150 maybe is where most people's expectations land in terms of what tiny home might cost them. Another question?
I'll let you pick one, Peter.
Oh, okay. Well, there's quite a few, which is encouraging. Yes. So, can tiny homes realistically become part of the volume building industry? I reckon there's a number of volume builders doing these. So there's Archiblocks in Melbourne, Pre-Built, Modscape. 3 companies come off the top of my head that are building these. They're flat out building transportable, either flat packs. So Modscape does flat pack housing here in Victoria. Pre-Built and Archiblocks do the more craned in pre-built pods that can be moved around. There's a huge industry growing. I think tiny homes, small homes, have a great part to play in the mix of what's available for the next generation. And I'm talking about not my generation, the one after us, because there's a limitation in cost, and the houses in Australia are coming down in size. We've got the largest houses in the world, 260 square metre average, and the cost of buying those and maintaining them, I think, is more difficult going forward with the current people trying to establish themselves. So I think this building has a huge future to play for the volume builders, and there's a number of builders in Melbourne that are mass builders that are going flat out. So go and have a look at Pre-Built online, or Archiblocks, BLOX, or Modscape, just 3 I know off the top here in Victoria that are really making these tiny homes available. Yeah, I'll pick another question, and we're running out of time, I think, Adam. But
we've got time for got time for one more question, and you already answered in that answer. Someone asked about Modscape, which you already just spoke about, so that's good. Okay.
Are plywoods and panel linings more suited to tiny living interiors for speed and affordability? Yes and yes. I'm not a big fan of plasterboard. It requires paint. It's full of, well, I don't like the product particularly, but what timber provides, and I lined that little RACV tiny home in just natural ply, is it's really durable. It doesn't mark, and it has a wonderful connection to nature. It just makes you feel good, and that's a proven attribute of it. And so it's durable, and it's when you're living in tiny homes, you're going to be all over the walls. Yeah? You're going to be touching them, brushing past them. So it's a way more affordable, and also it acts as a great bracing material. So it's if you've got to have a mobile or one house that's dropped in, it won't warp and rack as well very much. So it works on is that regard also. I'll do one more. Are plywoods and panel linings? I just did that one. Okay, what is the viability of CLT in this application, particularly in bush-prone, fire-prone areas? So CLT's cross-laminated timber. CLT's certainly a viable option. It's timber laminated in big panels together, but it's quite fireproof. Particularly if it's charred on the outside, but CLT, you have to put another skin on the outside of it. It's not designed to be left in the weather. So you can have CLT as the core structural element. I've tried to use CLT and cross-laminated timber in small buildings, but I haven't been able to get the affordability down. It really comes into play with larger buildings. So there is a CLT plant now available, now operating in Albury-Wodonga area. So it doesn't have to be imported from overseas as it once was a few years ago. So, but I think it's still finding its feet in terms of affordability for small buildings like this. Yeah.
Okay, so we might leave it there. Thank you so much, Peter. That was absolutely wonderful. And thanks for everyone for joining this morning. We had 1,100 people join us, so very popular topic.
Thank you, everybody.